Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the show that digs through the sources so you don't have to, pulling out the key stuff you need to know. Today, we are jumping into something truly wild, a realm that, well, it pretty much flips everything we think we know about physics, biology, maybe even consciousness itself. We're talking about fluidic space. You know, that super hostile, multidimensional place from Star Trek Voyager, home to species 8472.
Right. And our main source for this deep dive is Fluidic Space Speculative Composition from Dominion Publishing. And what's great about it is it's not just sticking to the show's canon. It really mixes that with like extrapolated science, some really out there theoretical dimensional physics. It pushes the envelope on what this place could actually be.
So that's our mission today. We're going to try and unpack what fluidic space is, you know, its physics, why it's so incredibly dangerous, and look at some speculative tech design maybe to interact with it. And then the really big questions. What if humans try to explore it? Or even colonize it? Because really, this isn't just cool sci-fi. It gets you thinking, what happens when reality itself just changes? What does that mean for you? What is fluidic space? A universe unlike our own. Okay, so let's start at the beginning, though. I guess nothing here is really basic. Fluidic space, it's described as totally different from normal space. Like, what is it even made of? Is it stuff?
Yeah, that's the key thing, isn't it? It's not a vacuum at all. The source describes it as this dense organic, maybe semi-organic fluid, things like cytoplasm, or something gelatinous, and get this possibly even semi-sentient, the space itself.
Semi-sentient. Wow, okay, so if it's this, like cosmic goo, no stars, no planets, like we know them, how does anything even exist in there?
Exactly. Forget stars and planets. Our source suggests there are no, traditional rocky or gaseous worlds. Instead, you've got these glowing bioluminescent energy wells and the idea of planets. Maybe they're these huge stable nodes of denser organic matter, almost like floating living islands or massive reef-like organisms.
Like a planet-sized coral reef or like the crystalline entity, maybe? Something that big and alive.
Sort of like that, yeah. And light. It might come from these giant bioluminescent life forms, or maybe from plasma-like currents in the fluid, kind of like deep-sea vents, but on a cosmic scale.
Okay, so what about other space stuff, like nebulae or black holes? Do they have equivalents in this fluid?
Well, nebulae wouldn't be gas, right? They could be currents carrying nutrients, maybe spores, or even like toxic bio-waste, things that could trigger sudden evolution or just destruction. And the black holes. The source speculates they might not work like ours. Maybe there are pockets where the biomatter itself is collapsing, or dimensional sinks, actual tears that cause instability. Species 8472 might even, farm these things for power, or maybe to guide their own evolution.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. What's it like for, say, a human just being there, assuming you could even get there?
Oh, unbelievably hostile.
Yeah.
A normal person would likely be, crushed by the pressure, poisoned, probably dissolved, maybe even mutated by the medium itself.
Physically torn apart.
Right. And then there's the psychic aspect. Intense telepathic pressure just filling the space. Could be natural, could be a defense from 8472, plus no up or down, total disorientation. Imagine being lost in this vast, living, featureless ocean that's also screaming in your head.
Okay, nightmare fuel. So given all that, how does life like species 8472 even function there? They don't build cities, right?
No, not mechanical ones. It's more like organic hives, or maybe mobile biological structures. The source suggests for 8472, their biology, their society, their habitat, it might all be merged. Their bioships, maybe their homes, labs, political fetters, all in one living entity. The whole dimension, it's almost like a giant hyper-evolved immune system, super aggressive towards anything foreign. 2, the mind-bending physics of fluidic space. Dimensional physics.
Right, you mentioned the physics are totally different. Defies Newtonian laws. Let's dig into that. Dimensional physics. Yeah. What does that actually mean for fluidic space?
Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, dimensional physics just means, the basic rules are different. The laws of physics as we know them, they don't apply. In fluidic space, the actual fabric of space-time is something else. Speed of light might not be constant, might not even matter. No vacuum, just this dense biochemical soup. Mass, inertia, they might be non-local, or depend entirely on the environment around you at that moment.
So yeah, like you said, a Starfleet ship can't just warp in. It wouldn't work, or it would just break.
It would almost certainly suffer total systems failure, or just, structural collapse. The ship isn't designed for that kind of stress, that kind of medium. Which brings up a huge question, right? How do you even navigate a place that's non-Euclidean, where distance and direction aren't fixed points, they're subjective? Movement isn't about thrust. A ship might need to, the source says swim, or even grow towards its destination. adapt its form to move through the fluid.
Swim or grow. That sounds less like physics and more like biology. Or a dream. What about time? Does time work normally?
Probably not. The source speculates time might not be linear there. It could pulse, maybe loop back on itself, or its flow could depend on biological states, growth, decay, mutation rates in the fluid.
Yeah.
Events might sync up with life cycles in the dimension, not with, a Federation stardate.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The sources mention conscious physics and matter-energy duality. What on earth does that mean?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It suggests matter and energy aren't really separate things there. They're more like a fluid, bioplasmic potential, something that can evolve, merge, self-assemble. So technology isn't something you build with metal, it's something you grow, like biological computing. Warp cores, impulse engines, totally useless. Travel becomes about integrating with the environment, like riding currents or using the flows.
And the conscious physics part, does that mean thought can change things?
That's the implication.
Yep.
Telepathic intention, maybe the collective will of species 8472, could actually shape reality locally. They might be actively maintaining or regulating the dimension with their minds.
Which explains why they react so aggressively to outsiders.
Exactly. An intrusion isn't just trespassing. It's like causing dimensional trauma. It triggers that immune response from 88472. And when they leave fluidic space, punching back into ours, it takes huge energy, risks contaminating both dimensions, and can apparently cause weird side effects like temporal echoes, mutation field, or intense psychic distress in anyone nearby. 3. Voyager's nightmare. Limitations and interaction with fluidic space.
Okay, so let's bring this back to Voyager. We saw them struggle massively in fluidic space. What were their biggest limitations, based on what we've just discussed?
Well, Voyager was built for vacuum, right? For warp travel. It wasn't designed for swimming through dense, corrosive, bioactive goo. So right away, mobility was shot, huge stress on the hull, constant danger of breaches, or the hull itself starting to corrode or mutate. And like we said, the physics were wrong. Warp drive, useless. Impulse engines, barely worked. Sensors, totally unreliable, couldn't make sense of the environment. Navigation was a nightmare. Trying to plot a course in non-Euclidean space where your map keeps changing, good luck.
And that psychic pressure you mentioned, how did that affect the crew directly?
It just saturated everything, caused disorientation, bad headaches, deep psychic stress. Especially tough on telepaths like Tuvok. It could even mess with perceptions, cause hallucinations. Makes you wonder, how would you function with that constant background noise, that psychic onslaught? There's no quiet place inside your own head.
So with all that against them, how did Voyager even survive encounters with species 8472? Their bioships seemed ridiculously overpowered.
They were vastly superior.
Yeah.
Faster, more maneuverable, incredible offensive power. I mean, they shredded Borg cubes like paper. And their shielding adapted instantly. Voyager's weapons, phasers, standard torpedoes, completely ineffective, totally useless, until they got that Borg tech, the nanoprobe torpedoes. That was the game changer.
And just being there was draining the ship.
Massively. Prolonged exposure was sucking power dry, risking total system failure, maybe getting trapped there permanently.
So getting in and out was a huge problem too. They needed help.
Yeah, absolutely. Punching a hole required enormous energy, and they needed Borg tech to stabilize the rifts. Without that outside help, they probably couldn't have reliably gotten back.
Yeah.
And the really tricky part, the ethical side. Species 8472 saw any presence as an infection, a violation. So even just trying to explore peacefully was, from their perspective, an act of war. Voyager basically survived on sheer improvisation, that very uneasy alliance with the Borg, and frankly, a healthy dose of pure luck. 4. Engineering a way in. The Fluidic Dimensional Transit Engine, FTTE.
Okay, so facing that kind of threat, that kind of impossible environment, our source material gets into how Starfleet might respond technologically, and this is where it gets really theoretical but fascinating. The idea of a fluidic dimensional transit engine, the FTTE, what is that exactly? How would it even theoretically work?
Right, this is Starfleet R&D going into overdrive. The FTTE is proposed as a way to maybe safely explore or even, down the line, colonize fluidic space. The core idea is called dimensional coupling theory. It suggests fluidic space isn't just somewhere else, it's like a parallel membrane vibrating differently. So transit isn't about brute force like punching a hole. It's about creating a localized field that tunes our space to fluidic space's frequency, letting them overlap safely.
So less like breaking down a door, more like tuning a radio, harmonizing with...
Exactly. Standard warp fields, they just push against the fluid, they're useless. The FTTE would need something different. Bioresonant phase fields or BRPFs. These fields are designed to mimic the organic waveform profile of fluid space itself, kind of tricking it, reducing the resistance.
Yeah.
Makes you think, right, what if future tech has to be almost alive or act alive?
And navigating that crazy space, no up, no down, subjective physics, how does the FTTE handle that?
That's where it gets really integrated with biology. It proposes a telepathic navigation layer, basically a neuroquantum computer core that interfaces directly with a telepathic crew member. So a Vulcan or a Betazoid navigator wouldn't be looking at a star chart. They'd be using their psychic senses, guided by the computer, to feel the currents and flows of the dimension itself. Biopsychic vectoring, they call it.
Okay, my brain is melting slightly. What are the actual nuts and bolts of this theoretical engine? What parts make it work?
Well, you'd have the dimensional interface core, the DIC. That's what initiates the phase corridor, the tunnel between dimensions. It's built around a quantum biofluidic reactor. Sounds crazy, but it supposedly uses stabilized nanoprobes, maybe Borg-derived, combined with actual transdimensional organic matter, basically a living reactor core.
Whoa.
Then you need stability lattice anchors, SLAs. These act like cosmic shock absorbers to stop the ship ripping itself apart when it crosses over. They use anti-frictional fields, tech supposedly adapted from Borg quantum shoe dampeners.
Borg tech again, mixed with living matter. That's meh, yeah. What about shielding? Protecting the ship from the fluid.
That would be the bioplasmic buffer shield, BBS. It's not a fixed shield. It's a hull adaptive field, literally grown from synthetic DNA designed to be compatible with species 8472's environment. Hardened with nanofilaments, it lets the ship effectively swim or glide through the medium without dissolving. And finally, a subdimensional event manager, SEM. Think of it as a predictive hazard system. It uses AI trained on telepathic waveforms to try and predict dangers like mutation storms or energy surges before they hit.
Okay, so if you actually built this, what kind of crew do you need? Beyond the usual Starfleet roles, and what are the biggest dangers, even with this tech?
You'd absolutely need specialists. A dedicated telepath for navigation, obviously, a xenobiological systems engineer to manage the living hull and the bioresonant fields, and a top-tier dimensional physicist for the rift calculations. The risks are still huge. Psychic contamination for the crew memory loss, identity fragmentation, hull mutation if the BRPF isn't perfectly tuned, and temporal problems entering or exiting could create feedback loops, sending you to the wrong time. V. A test run. USS entanglement simulation scenario.
The source even includes a simulation, like a theoretical test run, test transit, first contact protocol 8472.3, using a hypothetical ship, the USS entanglement. How did that play out in the simulation?
Yeah, the detail's great. It really helps visualize it. Phase I is initialization. Commander Trial, the Vulcan telepath, links with the neuroquantum core, and instantly the standard star map on the bridge display. Gone. Replaced by this flowing, shifting, nonlinear map based on Krall's psychic perception of the dimension. She's literally feeling the path.
So the ship's navigation becomes an extension of her mind. Wild. What happens when they actually try to enter fluidic space in the sim?
Phase 2. Dimensional penetration. Space outside starts shimmering, looking like thick gel. The FTTE fires its resonance beam, stars flicker out, and fluidic space sort of bleeds through, like a watercolor wash over reality. A rift opens. Organic fluids, described like molten light, drip into normal space. Sensors go crazy, zero vacuum reading, but off the charts, bioplasmic particulate density. The air itself feels thick, alive.
And then the psychic impact?
The
Wrecks her.
Phase 3, psychic feedback. Commander Trial collapses immediately, just overwhelmed by the telepathic noise. She's struggling to maintain the link. At the same time, the SAM detects an incoming mutation current, some kind of environmental hazard.
Yeah.
And then two species 8472 bioships appear, vectoring in fast.
Oh boy, conflict.
But crucially, no. They approach. But according to the SIM, they don't engage. The entanglement had its nanoprobe torpedoes ready, but held fire under the predefined peace protocol. Apparently, 8472 respected it, or at least hesitated.
Okay, tense, but they survived the encounter. How did the return trip go in the simulation?
Phase 4, return transit. The ambient energy in fluidic space is becoming unstable around them. The FTTE has to reroute power quickly. And here's a clever bit. They use the telepathic waveform echo, basically a recording of Tyrell's initial perception of the entry point stored in her neural scan, to perfectly retune the exit corridor. The ship slips back out, kind of in reverse. And the kicker, the temporal logs show the whole event took just 16 seconds ship time, but back in prime space, 3 hours had passed.
Wow, time dilation on that scale. So the FTTE worked, theoretically, but not without a cost.
Pretty much. The simulation showed the engine concept was viable. But yeah, definite psychic trauma for the telepath involved. And while 8472 didn't attack this time, the ship's hull registered a dimensional signature, basically, trace contamination. It proved that even with the FTTE, continuous adaptive shielding would be absolutely critical for longer missions. 6. The ultimate risk. Colonizing fluidic space.
So let's take the speculation one step further, like the source does. What if humans didn't just visit, but actually tried to colonize fluidic space? That seems almost unthinkable, given everything we've said.
Yeah, unthinkable is a good word. It would be incredibly complex, incredibly dangerous, and fundamentally transformative, not just biologically, but philosophically for anyone who went. First hurdle, the immediate biology. Like we keep saying, it's not empty space. It's dense, bioactive fluid, full of mutagens, spores, psychic pressure. Human bodies just aren't built for that. You'd mutate, dissolve, go insane. Your metabolism would fail.
So step one would require massive biological support or adaptation.
Totally. You'd need something like symbiotic biosuits just to survive the medium, artificial neuropsychic shields to block out the constant telepathic noise and prevent madness, maybe even use nanoprobe tech to try and terraform tiny pockets, create safe zones. But doing that, that's practically guaranteed to provoke species 8472. It's like deliberately infecting their bloodstream.
Which brings us to them. Species 8472, would they ever allow a permanent colony? Seems unlikely.
Extremely unlikely. Remember their perspective, which the source highlights. Any intrusion is a dimensional infection. Even a quiet, passive colony would probably trigger an immune response. Eradication strikes, tailored biological attacks, constant telepathic pressure to leave. Think about it from their side, right?
Yeah.
How would you feel if some alien bacteria started building cities inside your veins?
Yeah, point taken. Okay, but let's say somehow humans could establish a foothold. What happens to the colonists themselves living long-term in that environment?
That's where the philosophical side gets really deep. The source speculates about profound cognitive changes. You're living in an environment shaped by consciousness, where your own thoughts might tweak local physics. Shared psychic resonance could start to blur individual minds, alter identities. The very idea of a colony versus a sentient structure could dissolve. Humans might literally become part of the fluidic space ecosystem, not just residents in it.
So, they might stop being human in any recognizable sense. Not just adapting, but fundamentally transforming into something else.
Precisely. Fluidic space could act like an evolutionary pressure cooker. Rapid genetic drift, forced psychic evolution, maybe even biological fusion with the native biomatter. Over generations, humans there might become genuinely post-human. A new species, perfectly adapted to, or maybe even assimilated by, the dimension itself. It's not colonization, it's metamorphosis.
And what about the ripples back here, in prime space? For the Federation?
Oh, the political and strategic implications would be massive. The Federation might outlaw it, completely violation of the Prime Directive on a dimensional scale, maybe. Interfering with the sentient environment, provoking a powerful species. Plus, the Borg factor. Could they try to use a human colony as a backdoor into fluidic space? That could trigger a huge conflict spilling across dimensions. And just the act of maintaining a stable colony might destabilize fluidic space itself, potentially threatening the integrity of our own universe. It's playing with the cosmic fire. Outro.
So wrapping this up, wow, fluidic space isn't just another hostile alien place. It's a living dimension, isn't it? A thinking, reactive cosmos that fundamentally challenges everything we assume about exploration, about physics, about what it even means to be alive.
Yeah, exactly. That theoretical FTTE. It shows incredible technological adaptation.
Yeah.
But really surviving there, truly existing there long term, that requires a completely different mindset. An epistemological shift, as the source puts it. Exploration has to become empathy. Control has to give way to resonance, to being in tune with it. Anything you build has to become part of it. Anything you map, you have to feel. What you seek, you probably have to share.
And colonization, if anyone ever dare, it wouldn't be about planting a flag. It would be transformation, pure and simple. Any presence we establish there, no matter how careful, would send ripples through everything, space, biology, culture, maybe the very definition of being sentient. So the ultimate question isn't just, can we go there? It's, should we? Especially if the price of going is that you might not be able to come back, not because the tech fails, but because you are no longer the you that left. Fluidic space. In the end, it's not just alien. It feels like a test of our humility, our imagination, and maybe a test of what it really means to be alive in a universe that thinks back at you.